we're live. Good
Woohoo!
morning, good afternoon, good evening. How are you, Shannon?
Yeah, I'm well. How are you?
I am good. It's
Are you living the dream?
I am living the dream. Can you not tell?
Crystal and I work on the developer advocacy team for the Identity and Network Access division. So we focus a lot on a number of different topics, and this month we're focusing on identity governance. So the whole point of this swarm is focusing on identity governance and making Azure AD identity governance work for
Correct.
you. What you should do here is check out this blog. This is the short URL that'll take you to where everything's going to house over the course of the next couple of weeks here. All of our activities that we've got planned thus far, we're going to add a couple more activities, so this will evolve and change. But the big piece here is we concluded that the best bet might be to have you go through and complete the Microsoft Learn path for the SC300 that focuses on how to plan and implement an identity governance strategy. Fill out the questionnaire underneath that certification badge line. Fill that out by May 13th, and you'll be eligible for a discounted exam voucher to take the SC300, which is starting to become a really hot topic in the world of the IT pro community, the solution architect community. So you get a really cool badge.
But you're doing it for the knowledge, not for the badges, right? It's for the
Well,
glory of knowledge.
yeah, it's probably a little bit of both, let's be honest, right? Like people always want those badges, but they also like learning too. So it's probably a little bit of both. So then I think that brings us to our guest. Aaron is over in Australia and he's 15 hours ahead of me. He's 17 hours ahead of Christos, which basically means it's his morning. It's tomorrow for him.
Yeah.
It's Wednesday morning.
Morning.
So Aaron, what does your day-to-day look like at Microsoft?
It's a great question. Modern Work Specialist basically makes me the go-to for all things Microsoft 365. So I talk through all of the various components of Microsoft 365 and all the supporting technologies, things around it, with my customers here in Australia. And I work with the Australian federal government, so based in Canberra, our capital, and
Okay.
I help those folks to understand how all the bits fit together, what's there in the box, and what it can do for them, importantly. So yeah, it's kind of like part education, part evangelism, part sales, part marketing. It's a great role. I've had a blast in it for the last 5 years.
Nice.
And I've been at Microsoft about 8 years now. So the whole time a modern work guy, that's what I do.
Oh, very cool. Very cool. So, I heard about you, Aaron, by way of your website. So let's show the website.
Awesome. Thank you. Look, it's what you're seeing is sort of function over form. Let me just put that out straight up. I'm not a graphic designer. I'm a software developer by trade prior to joining Microsoft. So it's very functional, let's say, as opposed to pretty. But basically what the site does, it just pulls together a whole collection of licensing diagrams, lots of different diagrams that I've created over the last few years and I maintain to help people to understand how our licensing fits together. So, when I joined Microsoft, the material around O365 licensing was still, let's be generous, developing. So, there was lots of tables with crosses and ticks, and that was about the depth of it. Or you went to the really, really deep stuff, which was, do a degree in licensing language, and then you'd be able to navigate that. And so I thought there was an opportunity for something that kind of made it more visual, and that's what this does. And you can see one of the pictures over my shoulder here, which is one of the diagrams as a poster. It's his visual way of representing our licensing. So how that kind of evolved into building and maintaining a website for it was because I was using it in my own work day to day, and customers and partners and colleagues really seem to gravitate towards it. And so it's become a tool that I use every day. And, that makes it easy to maintain because I've got a vested interest in doing so. But I can show folks around what we're looking at here, maybe get under the covers of it a little bit. So you'll see here last updated in January. Up until the last couple of weeks, things have been relatively quiet on the licensing front, but we've had a few big announcements recently, so there'll be an update coming in the next week or so to the site.
Keeps you busy, right?
Yeah. I don't know if you folks have seen it. I woke up this morning, Australian time, and everything's now called Purview, just sort of like what we had with the Defender brand refresh a little while back. So that's going to take a little bit of effort, but that's okay. So let me jump in and show you how the site works, though. So say we wanted to have a look at the Enterprise Mobility and Security Suite. We could click into this diagram, and you'll see straight away it's the kind of Venn diagram layout happening here. It's nested boxes to show you what each of the components are. So at the very core of it, we've got our Azure Active Directory Premium, Plan 1, and you can see the dashed line that fits around this set of functionality. All of these tiles are actually clickable, and they'll go through to Microsoft online documentation for that product or component. And then if you sort of zoom out a bit, you can see that that fits inside the wrapper of EMS E3, and then all of it fits inside EMS E5. So it gives you a visual way to navigate how our licensing is structured, and there lets you figure out where things fit or what you have. You may own some of these components and want to learn a bit more about what's in the box.
Right. Very cool. I like the way that you visually put this together. In fact, if it was me, I would do the same thing. I'd have my own poster of it behind me. I like this because I feel like it's changed and evolved over time. So seeing this like the way you presented it was a super great refresher for me when I was coming over to the identity division from dealing a lot in the realm of Azure, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And so, you know, what started as a standalone EMS diagram and a standalone Office 365 diagram, of course, a few years back evolved into Microsoft 365. And that's where things get really big, and you got to zoom in and out, right? Yeah.
Is that a high quality SVG, or is that HTML elements that you have on the?
No, it's an SVG. So all the diagrams are scalable, and it means that you can print them out as big as you want or zoom in as much as you like. So that's a really
and they're all downloadable on the site as well, which I thought was an awesome thing to have, right? Especially for folks who are tuning in, trying to make sense of this. Maybe they're trying to influence the people that decide these things, right? Do we need to buy this, or do we need to understand this better? The PDF, PNG, SVG, it's awesome to see that it's all there.
Yeah, absolutely. All open source.
Yeah. It's interesting how sometimes the field will come in to fill the gaps where corporate has not caught up yet, and then we create tools and capabilities that are not there, because I was in the field as well. Sano was in the field. I remember we built tools about how to navigate cloud, for example, Azure, find all the services and how they can interact and what capabilities you have. But yeah, it's absolutely insane how people like you will jump in to create these tools that everybody can use. So thank you for doing that.
No, it's an absolute pleasure. It's kind of grown much larger than I ever anticipated. I get contact every week from folks around the world.
like me. Yeah. Hey, Aaron, we've never met before. We'd like to have you on our show.
Exactly.
Which is great. So thank you for having me on, folks.
So we have a comment from Brave Cobra that says, even intro page can be confusing, and it's not our fault. He says, not your fault. I hope that he means not our fault, or C means not our fault. They. I need to use the right adjective here. But it's a Microsoft issue, and sometimes you need a PhD to understand MS licensing. So you probably come across this one a lot. What is the easiest way to clarify or explain the Microsoft 365 or Office 365 licensing for customers?
Yeah, it's a common thing folks will say. You know, Microsoft licensing is very complicated.
Yeah.
And you know, I always respond to that Microsoft licensing, the complexity, it's really born out of flexibility. So it's about meeting people where they are, whatever licensing they've got, however far into this product suite they've gone, and giving them incremental steps from there. So, you know, if you looked at that diagram before with EMS, or you jump in and look at even the big overview of Microsoft 365 Enterprise, you know, there's typically step-ups and add-ons that will move you from where you are to the next piece of functionality. So if I was, you know, just an Office 365 E3 customer and I had all these red boxes here, I could add on things like Defender for Office 365, or I could step up to Microsoft 365 E3 and add EMS and Windows into, and then maybe I could go from there to adding in Microsoft 365 E5 security. So there's a lot of flexibility that's built into the licensing, and often that doesn't come through, and it's hard to communicate that on a standard product marketing page. It's hard for me to sort of explain that in a visual form like this. But really, that's why there's this complexity. That's why there's all these subdivisions of different license types that you see here, even underneath the Microsoft 365 E5, for example.
Yeah.
It's so that you can meet customers where they are and help them to step up incrementally or in big ways if it makes sense to do so. And so hopefully a tool like this helps you to kind of look at the big picture and say, okay, well, maybe I'm going to move to this and add this, and over time we might bring in these other features and functions. And that's kind of where this website has started to evolve towards as well, this idea of helping people to plan out that journey. So there's now a whole bunch of diagram editing and annotation tools built in as well, so that folks can plan out their journey and keep track of where they are.
So the analogy here is that you take what you need, and that's why we have so much complexity, I guess, around licensing, right? We don't want to force you to buy everything up front when you're only going to use 10%. So we want you to slowly build that model based on how your company evolves or your business evolves, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. What we really don't want to have happen, and this is a conversation I have with my customers all the time, we don't want people to just sort of take the top tier and have all these things they're not using and then come back 6 months later and go, wow, why did we do that? That wasn't a good move. Mm-hmm. We would, it's a subscription world these days, right? So folks can add and remove stuff pretty easily. We really don't want customers being left with that bad taste in their mouth that they've made a mistake and bought too much that they're not using. So yeah, we definitely want people to find that balance of what they need now and then over time change that as necessary.
Very nice. Shannon, back to you.
So, our Swarm, it's focusing on identity governance, right? Which you get with the P2 license SKU. When you work with customers, what are some of the reasons that customers are choosing to have these conversations? Is there anything specific about right now or any unique use case? I feel like the folks tuning in, they like to hear why customers are picking this as a potential solution. And given the fact that you probably talk to so many different subdivisions, different business units, I'm imagining, you've got your own set of customers, but you might be talking to customers within these different groups too. So is there anything that, would shed light as to why a customer would be looking at P2 in your experience?
Yeah, absolutely. Different folks have different reasons, but I can certainly speak to a couple of things that I'm seeing within my customer base here in Australia. And I think they translate, folks want simplicity. I think that, when I was a software developer on the ground with a very technical mindset, working in this area, simplicity was kind of not really where my head was at. But when I talk to more business leaders, IT leadership, decision makers, simplicity is really important these days. We've got a kind of a skills shortage in IT. You can't be building in these complex, multi-layered integration solutions and then having people sit around maintaining that or even just spending all the time to get it in. There's a simplicity of the Microsoft suite, which is it's pre-integration. You can add this very quickly. You can turn it on. You can read a guide. You can do the SC300 and learn how to configure these components.
Right.
And you can get value really quickly. So time to value is really important as well. And then you're getting something that's properly integrated and covers the breadth of the Microsoft technology underneath. And when we're talking about identity, 9 times out of 10, that's a Microsoft stack all the way down. So having that ability to switch it on and get that coverage and capability out of the box, usually through again something technical folks won't care as much about, but through a procurement channel that you are familiar and because you buy from Microsoft already, you know how to execute that. You have the trust and the safety of continuing to work under that arrangement and partnership and agreement. Those things all have value. So yeah, that's some of the reasons why. But then you get into the technical, more specific reasons. Capabilities in this area are just moving so fast, and Microsoft's introduced so much amazing capability here that people want to jump in and take advantage of. So one of the things I talk about in my role, I'm a true believer. I love this stuff. I can speak to every tile that's on all my diagrams because I just love soaking up information about it. I really believe that if I can get in and educate our customers on what's there, they'll want to take that on. They'll want to get that into their environment. And my experience so far has been that's fairly true. We've got some great capability. If people just knew it was there, they'd absolutely jump at the opportunity to bring it in.
We have 3 questions from our audience. How do you figure out what you need to get started? Like, where do you start?
What will typically happen is everyone's coming with an idea about something they want to make better, or they're coming with a problem that they want to solve. Okay. So, maybe they've had a security incident, and that would be a problem. Maybe they've got, pressure from the senior leadership to move more capability to the cloud because they're sold on that as an idea that they need to act on, or maybe they're trying to do some new thing that they haven't done before. They want to interact with the public in a B2C scenario, or even just across their partners that they operate with in a B2B context. And so they'll be coming with something like that. Yep. And then what we try to do is help them to map that to the technology. One of my first managers said to me something that's really stuck with me throughout my career, which is, if you can be that person who can sit in the middle of the technology and the business need, and you can translate those two worlds, you'll have a job for life. And I've kind of tried to do that. I take the diagrams that I've built around the licensing to try to simplify that as much as I can. Yep. And I help people to map what it is that they're trying to do for whatever reason across to that. And so there's a raft of folks across Microsoft and in our partner community that can help customers to do that. Yep. And so, that's usually how it starts, because everyone's got a different reason. Everyone's trying to solve a different problem. Sometimes, it's very urgent around a security issue, and identity comes in and plays a big role when that happens. And, you ask all the basic questions about, have you turned on multi-factor authentication, for example?
Yeah.
That would solve so much. Sorry, I digress.
It would. No, it's fine. So there's another question there. There are certain capabilities that we don't really sell as add-ons or separate packages. For example, if you need conditional access, you can't just buy conditional access. You have to jump to a P2 license to get certain capabilities. What do you think is the right approach, and should we have a more fine-tuned add-on model?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it comes up quite regularly. And there's a couple of different reasons why this happens. And some of them are purely Microsoft commercial. At the end of the day, it is a business. But I would liken it to, the ability to buy a burger and throw the pickle away. You still get value out of the burger. Like, it's still a good burger. Maybe you don't want the pickle. That's okay. Yeah. So that happens a bit. Folks will see individual components and they'll say, oh, okay, I see value enough in that I'll buy the package. I'll get all the pieces. Sometimes, folks don't realize they've got something that can solve the problem because it's part of a package. And sometimes products don't get the airtime. They don't get talked about much, but we want to make sure people have got access to it when they need it. So throwing in things like terms of use capability, the various conditional access components, and then multi-factor authentication. We want to make sure everybody's got the ability to turn on multi-factor authentication. What we'd hate to have happen is, there's some sort of incident, someone says, hey, we really need this, and then there's a lengthy procurement process to make that a reality. That's no fun. So there's different reasons why things are packaged. Sometimes there's functional connections where you can't have one feature without the other one being there, or it breaks the software. But as I say, sometimes it's also commercial. Yeah, certainly.
I like your analogy of the burger and the pickle. What's that assessment process look like when they call you in and they say, we need help understanding licensing? How do you sort of help them realize what they need?
You often find there's a lot unsaid in IT. Everyone knows that identity governance has been challenging in the past, and they kind of don't even bring it up. So if you went in and asked someone in IT, about how their identity platform's going, they might say, yeah, it's okay, but because it's just assumed that that their governance is not great. In my experience, at least, that's a very common thing. So you kind of have to pry a little bit. You've got to dig into it and sort of talk about, hey, that classic problem of how over time everyone just accumulates more and more permissions,
Yes.
more and more access, and it never goes away. And then you say that, and they go, oh, yeah, like that's a huge problem here. I can't believe.
How did you know?
Yeah, exactly. Right. Psychic. So we know these things are there.
Yes.
But often when you just flat out ask a customer, they won't necessarily bring it up in a general context until you actually dig into it. And so I come back to my own maps and I look at it and I say, well, okay, they brought me in because they wanted to talk a little bit about how to manage privileged identity and the escalation of privilege for admins, but I'll look at that map and that gives me the clue to say, well, hang on, I want to make sure they understand the breadth of what they would get if they took up that component. So let's talk about access reviews and let's talk about entitlement management and how those things play a role. And what about that broader identity protection set of capabilities? And then sure enough, you dig into those things, everybody's got the same challenges.
Yes.
Nobody's living the dream of identity governance, but for a small few. So yeah, there's a rich field of questions there that you can sort of uncover and dig into.
It all comes through discussion with the customer, because awareness is probably the biggest key in being successful around these things. Usually not the money. Most of the companies have the money to throw, right? It's just how do I do it, and I don't have the knowledge, so help me out.
Yeah, absolutely. And these things generally aren't expensive, what we're talking about today, these components. They're if you talk to an IT leader inside an organization, the cost of these components is not going to be their concern.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to be interested in how quickly they can get it into their environment, how hard it is for their people to implement and manage. And then again, that's that great value of the Microsoft suite, that you can just turn these things on very, very quickly and easily. And the documentation and the learning material around this has come a million miles just in the time I've been here. You folks were talking about the SC300 at the top of the call. I mean, the material in there is fantastic. I mean, we dreamed of having that kind of content back when I was in the partner world, years back. So, sometimes you'll find the customer, and we say the customer, but the customer is a collection of people, right?
Yeah.
So there's someone inside the customer will probably know about Azure Active Directory and all the great features that are there. But have they done that work of translating that into the business outcomes and solutions for themselves? Possibly not. Someone tucked away in IT, when you eventually go down there with the CIO and you say, hey, did you know you have this conditional access feature or this access review capability? They may say, yeah, I know we've got that. Well, but that never helped them to get it implemented. So, just again, joining the dots, helping folks across the organization understand what's possible is a really big part of it, because so many folks own at least that Azure AD Premium Plan 1 feature set. And that's just so common because it's in so many of our different suites, different licensing packages, that there's always something there that they could be using that they didn't even know they had, or at least at a level within the organization they didn't know they had.
Yeah. Now, do you talk mostly to decision makers, Aaron, or are you spending time with a mixed audience? I'm curious to know, just to understand how those conversations sort of come about, right? Because I think gone are the days of having everybody get into a room at the same time. So I'm wondering who you typically talk to.
It's changing over time. So when I joined Microsoft, I started as a technical specialist in Office 365. And so that was all about get down, talk to the folks, right down low inside IT.
Sure.
And as I've sort of moved through roles inside Microsoft, I'm now a specialist, which means I'm more at the solution level rather than deep in the tech. But of course, it's hard to shake off that past. And so you tend to be able to speak a little bit deeper down in, and you get connected further in. As an organization, Microsoft's also trying to kind of get higher up into the decision makers, because we know that's the level where things happen. And you can bubble up information through IT, but sometimes you've got to just be the person that joins the dots with the business. So I would say I'm having a mix today, probably 60 to 80% on the business decision maker side, and much less so to the technical. But it's still a substantive part of what I do. It's still important and big. I do have a team as well. We all operate in these V teams. So I have a bunch of technical specialists that I also work with who can go right down deep in, and I'll introduce them into the conversation when it makes sense to do so as well.
Got it.
It's complicated now, right? There's so many decision makers.
Right, right, and so many different ways that people are stacking their company. You know, and it lends itself to maybe this next question I can think of, and I know we had chatted a little bit about this. Has the pandemic changed anything, right? And that's kind of a leading question because I suspect it has, right? And probably quite a bit. But I'm wondering, do these customers, are they now thinking about identity governance maybe where they weren't before because we've been stretched between home and no, we haven't really been in the office much. I mean, I haven't been to the office for over 2 years. So I'm curious to know if the pandemic has shaped some of these conversations, maybe the necessity to bring some of these solutions to bear.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the ways that my customers worked through the pandemic was introducing many of these technologies in the Microsoft 365 ecosystem. And in doing that, for some of them, it was, you know, one of the first times they were really connecting their staff outside the office with systems outside the office. And, you know, there was concerns about the control that they would have, the security of that. And they wanted more assurance that the people that were connecting to these systems that were out of their control were the people that they believed them to be, that, you know, when people needed access, they got it. When they didn't, they lost it, etc. So it really heightened the importance of identity, and the security and compliance aspects of identity just became paramount for my customers during the pandemic. And since, that flexibility that everybody gained is not going away.
Right.
You know, I'm at home at the moment. Yeah, it's a capability now everybody wants and sees the benefit of. I mean, here in Australia, we have a government agency called the Productivity Commission, and they did a report and said, you know, everyone was worried that productivity would go down with all this remote work. No, it went up. That flexibility should stay, and that's been echoed in studies around the world, of course. So, yeah, that got a lot of IT leadership nervous. You know, what they had in their control previously was now outside, and so identity came to the fore, and we've seen, you know, in really positive ways, we've seen things like good, strong multi-factor authentication just take off. But then the follow-up to that is, oh, okay, but how are we governing the access that folks have? How are we governing the access of our administrators? And how are we going to stay on top of this so that we don't end up with, you know, half our workforce being admins within the next 6 months just through the permissions being added all over the place? So yeah, became huge topic within my customer base.
So here's another good question for you as well. So we keep hearing that an easy way for customers to get started is the business to business or B2C sort of realm. Have your customers explored that avenue? Maybe have they used that as kind of their starter path into identity governance? Just curious to know kind of if that might be the fast path, or if there is a fast path, right?
It does vary. Different customers are going to have different approaches here. They're going to have, for example, my customers predominantly don't have that B2C scenario so much as they have the B2B scenario.
Got it. Okay, sure.
And then one thing that's really common across my customers is, tell me about somebody who's done this before. You know, they want to know that they're not the first ones down this path in their industry or you know, the kind of problem that they have. And so a lot of what I do is connecting folks with what others have done, and then trying to find repeatable patterns and practices. I think everybody found in the move to cloud that what they thought they understood and what the reality was sometimes weren't 100% aligned. And, you know, folks would start some great new capability, but they hadn't put in the right identity protections and multi-factor, et cetera. And then they got caught out, or they had an issue, either in a really negative way, like a breach, or in the sort of less negative but painful way where they overdid the controls, and as you say, you know, the CEO can't access their email. What often happened was the executive assistant to the CEO could no longer log in as the CEO and access.
Oh yeah, I would say that seems more accurate.
yeah. So that one came up more often than not. But so I think folks now are a little bit cautious about new capability. They want to know this is tried and tested. No, you know, the cloud is moving fast, and sometimes folks don't want to be at the cutting edge of some, you know, brand new capability. So a lot of what I do, as I say, is connecting them with who's done this before and how did they do it, and can we see what they did? Is there a pattern here? And I think this is one of the things that we can do more of, both inside Microsoft and in our partner community. just more broadly is show the patterns, show how we did it, show the working out on the homework, and bring that out and say, well, this is how we did it. This is a path you can take, and you'll have this outcome, and you should feel confident that it's been done before, and it leads to this result. That's a big part of what I've been doing day to day with my customers.
And is it a hard thing to get customers kind of connected together?
I'm lucky a bit because they're all kind of within a certain
The same
group.
ecosystem. Yeah.
Yeah. But this is true even before I worked with government. I worked with commercial customers here in Australia, and you'll have the thing where competitors don't want to share information, but often it kind of surprised me how many customers were willing to share with others that maybe weren't directly competitive. If you had two supermarket chains, they wouldn't want to share together their information, but you might find a smaller player or someone who has a similar problem, and they would say, yeah, you can share what we did with them. That's fine. Most folks don't have the time to write it all up and publish it online, or
It's true.
do all that work. So if you can jump in and help them, that's another great thing that you can do to say, well, let me write it up. I'll explain it, and if you're happy with how I've written it up, I'll take that to the next folks, and they can learn from it. And a lot of organizations, or at least a lot of people within IT, are very happy to do that and share. And I think that's been one of the great things I've seen over the last few years, is the willingness to share the journey that folks have had with others.
Yeah, I feel like that's invaluable. And that's something that, to your point, it's a little tough if they're in the same line of business, but if they're relatively similar, or maybe they have the same regulations, getting them connected to at least figure out what they did is always invaluable, because you're always going to have those customers that want to let somebody else lead. And it's just up to those leaders to be able to share that information back in a way that's easy to consume.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you had mentioned that you don't have any telemetry on the site itself, but you do have some telemetry that you're getting from search engines. How many hits was it again? I can't remember. I just have it in my notes.
The website itself doesn't have any external, tracking cookies or, analytics or anything like that. It's really raw, really simple. It loads fast. It's not bogged down by any of that stuff. And I didn't want all the, pop up, accept the cookies, banners, and all that sort of stuff. So
yeah, agreed.
Kept it really, really simple. Also, as you say, I didn't want to get bogged down in, obsessing over which bits people are clicking on and all of that sort of stuff. I'm getting sort of 10,000 plus on Google and Bing per month. It's getting big. And it's a little bit scary. I feel like there's a lot of responsibility kind of, that comes with that. So, yeah.
So we definitely thank you for joining the 425 show. Hopefully you found it enjoyable. Hopefully our banter didn't scare you off, and maybe there's an opportunity to have you back on in the future.
That sounds fantastic. Thank you so much for having me on, folks. Really, really appreciate it. It's great to get out and talk about some of this stuff, and they can feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn and Twitter. You've got the handle there.
Woohoo.
There.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to thank Aaron one more time. Thanks, Aaron, for joining. Thanks for giving us a glimpse into what tomorrow's like. And I look forward to keeping you on the speed dial, so to speak. So I'm sure there's going to be an opportunity for us to have you back on the show talking about some of the new stuff you've done. And I mean, if people reach out too, if there's some interesting enhancements you decide to do, we'd always love to have you back on to showcase some of that.
Thanks, everyone. See you soon.
Thanks, everyone.